For my demonstration speech, I was going to be demonstrating how to change a rear sprocket on a motocross tire, but in an unforeseen circumstance, I ended up wrecking my dirt bike at a race this past weekend, this Saturday, and I broke this collarbone, so I really can't use my left hand, which does not allow me to actually do all the steps in showing how to change it, so I'm just going to describe it and try to really get into detail about it, and hopefully it'll be just as good. Okay. So a rear motocross sprocket is one of the easiest ways you can do to really help define the bike to what you want it to be. It really can help you dial in for certain tracks, certain circumstances, and it's really one of the easiest things you can do and one of the cheapest ways to adjust your bike to how you want to ride. So I usually have at least 2 or 3 sprockets that I could use with me at all times. So a rear sprocket is just a piece of metal, circular piece of metal, steel, aluminum, and zirconium usually, one of those 3. And all it does is it drives the dirt bike. Dirt bikes are chain driven, so there's a drive shaft that goes into a sprocket that a chain wraps around that rolls back to the rear tire, which another chain, or the chain wraps around another sprocket, which rotates the tire, which allows the tire to propel the dirt bike forward. So it's pretty simple. It depends what you want to do with it. Aluminum reduces the weight of the dirt bike, and steel gives you more longevity from the sprocket itself. So I'm going to get into how to start changing it now. So in the dirt bike, there is a bolt that runs through the one side, through the tire, out the other side of the swing arm. There is a nut on the end, which would be, if you're looking at the rear of the dirt bike, the right side. So what you want to do is you want to loosen that bolt all the way up, take it all the way off, and there's a washer behind the bolt. You want to take that washer off too and lay it with the nut wherever you may lay it. Then you want to take a hammer, rubber mallet, something, but you don't want to use metal. You want to use rubber. So if you have a hammer, which I don't have a rubber mallet, so I use this hammer, you don't want to use this top end. You want to use this end, the handle, which is rubber, and that won't damage the bolt any when you go to hit it through the tire. So once you do that, you get the bolt out and you make sure that you don't set it on any dirt or any stones, loose dirt, anything, because that needs to be really clean, and it's also a really good process when you put it back together to grease it up. So once you have the bolt out, you can then lift up on the tire and push it forward. So when you lift and push forward, you can take your finger and pop the chain off of the rear sprocket, which will then allow you to completely remove the rear tire from the dirt bike. Now, that's probably the easiest part of this. I mean, it's quick, easy. You don't need to do anything crazy, take a bunch of parts apart. It's a bolt and a nut. So once you have it off, you want to lay your tire up against something that you could use for leverage. I usually set mine between my legs because that gives me the ability to push a lot of force on the sprocket bolts and nuts. So the way it's oriented is, this is my old sprocket. So the bolt will sit in one of these holes. It'll run through this side, and the nut will be sitting on this side. So the front side, which would be the side you see from the outside of the dirt bike, will have an Allen key entry. So you use an Allen key to loosen it up. And then this back side, this one is a 14mm wrench. So what you want to do is you want to put the Allen key in the slot, put the wrench on this side, and loosen. Hold the Allen key with one hand and push with the other hand on the wrench, and that will allow the nut to loosen and the bolt will not spin with it. So if you don't do that, you'll just sit there and spin and spin and spin, and you won't get anywhere. So once you do that, for this, it really doesn't matter. I just go in a straight circular pattern from one to the other, all the way around till they're loosened up. And when you take them out, make sure you set them aside. You need those. You cannot put the dirt bike back together if you're missing one of them bolts. You have to have every single one of them. Okay? So once you get all of them out, you can remove it. It'll just pop straight off the tire. Now, when you go to line it back up, as you can see in this, see how I've already used this one and it's got those little slots? Yeah, it only sits in there one fully correct way. It will not sit any other way. So you know if it is wrong, it will be unsettled and it won't be right. Okay, so once you figure it out that it's right, you got it set up the way you need it to be, then you want to start putting the bolts back in. At first, it really doesn't matter. You can put them all in a circle, cross pattern, doesn't matter. But just finger tighten them all to start with. And then once you get that done, then you want to go on a cross pattern. So if you start here, then you want to tighten this one all the way up, then this one, and then maybe this one, and this one, and then this one, and this one. You want to make sure you do that so the sprocket is evenly distributed throughout the whole tire. It's not sitting like this or like this. It's sitting perfectly straight. So once that's on, then you can actually put the tire back onto the dirt bike. Now it will set right here. This is a brake rotor. This will slide in there. That's probably the easiest way to make sure your tire's in the right spot, is to have it in that brake rotor. Once that, you can push it all the way forward. Once it's in the brake pads, push it all the way forward, wrap the chain around it, and then you can just let it hang and the chain will hold it up. Once you do that, you make sure all the holes are lined up from one side to the other. Put your bolt back in that is well greased, cleaned, and no damage to it or whatsoever. Put it back in the exact same way it came out. Then you can take your nut and you can put it back on your washer, then your nut, tighten it, and that's it. Make sure it's really tight so it doesn't get loose when you're riding and come off. And that's it. And that's how you change a sprocket.